Hi everyone, Spider-Man 1991 here, and it is day 6 of Spider-Man Week. For those of you who haven't been watching, Spider-Man Week is basically my week-long video tribute to Spider-Man and celebrating two big things coming out this week. First off, the Amazing Spider-Man movie, which will come out this Tuesday, and the release of Amazing Fantasy, the 50th anniversary issue reprint. Okay, so now it's time for something that I think a lot of people... I got emailed a bunch of questions about this particular idea when the movie was coming out. Usually when a summer movie came out for the past 2 years, I did a video in which I reviewed my entire graphic novel collection and talked a little about it in one video. However, now those videos became like too much to do because I had to find every single one of my books, and I'm usually stuck in between two places where I live, and so I had to bring one set over to where I am where I go live in the summer, and another set back to where I stay for the rest of the year, and it just became too much. So I decided instead, since this summer Spider-Man and Batman are coming out, two of my favorite heroes. So, I have a lot of those books. I decided, okay, there's no way I can do that. And even if I did, the video would probably be like an hour long or something. So I decided just to stick to top 5 story arcs. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite Spider-Man graphic novel story arcs. The reason I say graphic novel or story arcs is, well, you're about to find out. So the first on the list, number 5, is The Birth of the Hobgoblin, the origin of the Hobgoblin. This collects the first issues. This collects the first Hobgoblin story arc. It came out in the early 1980s when the writer of Amazing Spider-Man at the time, Roger Stern, was under pressure from Marvel to have Spider-Man fight the Green Goblin again. However, Stern didn't want to bring back Norman Osborn or the third Green Goblin, Bart Hamilton, who was Harry Osborn's psychologist, and he also didn't want Harry to come back into the Goblin role or create another Green Goblin. So instead, he decided to create a new heir to the character known as the Hobgoblin. Basically, the Hobgoblin basically what happened was Spider-Man was chasing after 4 criminals who robbed a bank. One got away and hid in the sewers. The one criminal that got away eventually found one of Norman Osborn's hidden goblin lairs. He went back to tell his boss. The boss killed him, and then the crime boss took over, found the lair, and took over as the new Hobgoblin. And the thing about the Hobgoblin that had a wild appeal was that his identity was not revealed immediately. Okay, I mean, for the first story arc of this, there is no indication on who he is or what his plan is. Well, actually, his plan is basically commit crime, get a ton of money, and cause chaos and stuff. But his identity was very well hidden. Unfortunately, though, Stern left the series after issue 252, and after that, Tom DeFalco took over, and DeFalco was originally going to reveal the Hobgoblin as the Richard Fisk, the son of the Kingpin, and Roger Kingsley as the Rose. However, the ultimate outcome was the reverse. Although eventually, they did do another story arc where it was revealed the Hobgoblin was Ned Leeds. But then Stern came back in. But then eventually Stern returned, and he pitched an idea for the story in which Ned Leeds wasn't the original Hobgoblin, and the original Hobgoblin was in fact Roger Kingsley, who also appeared before this arc in 2 issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. And that's something that's also collected in this book, is Roger Kingsley's first appearances. So, it is kind of spoiled for you, but this thing's over 20 years old, so you should have known by now. And the good thing about the Hobgoblin was how they hid his identity. That was one of the things that I enjoyed that they did. Unfortunately, though, I think given the unfortunately, though, it is sad that Stern did leave right before he could reveal who the real Hobgoblin was immediately. So, it's unfortunate, but this is a very great story arc. It also deals with Harry Osborn having to deal with not just Spider-Man dealing with the Return of the Goblin, but also Harry Osborn too. So, this is pretty great, and I would definitely recommend this. All right, number 4. Ever wonder what superheroes in comic books? Death is often a revolving door. So, if a hero dies, how would they spend their last days? Well, that's answered in Spider-Man: The Other. Basically, The Other was written by J. Michael Straczynski. Straczynski, yeah, I think I'm saying the name right. Anyways, The Other, and pretty much Spider-Man Morlun returns to take his revenge on Spider-Man. However, also Spider-Man discovers that he's dying of, well, they don't exactly say what it is, but I'm just assuming it's cancer. And so Spider-Man's dying, and he tells this to Mary Jane, Aunt May, who at the time knows his secret identity, and he also tells the New Avengers, the original New Avengers, who he's living with in Stark Tower. Anyways, he tells them all, and what does Peter Parker do with his last few days? He spends it with his family. He spends it with Mary Jane, and then he spends some time with Aunt May, and it's very, very touching, very nice. But then one day when he's web-slinging, Morlun shows up, and they have a huge fight, and that ultimately ends in the lab where Peter Parker was bit by the radioactive spider. And when they drew the lab in this book, they made it like the lab from Spider-Man the movie. That was pretty impressive. And basically Morlun beats Spider-Man to death, and he's rushed to the hospital. The Avengers show up, and Mary Jane is given some time alone, but Peter is still there, still hanging on there by a thread. Morlun shows up again, gets ready to kill Spider-Man one last time, but then he threatens to hurt Mary Jane. That somehow causes like some sort of spider animalistic instinct in Peter, and he starts to develop these stinger things, which are like stakes coming out of his wrists, and goes and pretty much defeats Morlun. And at that moment, Peter dies. A few issues later, though, we discover that Peter has been alive while Peter's body, the one in the hospital room, is dying. The real Peter Parker is actually in some sort of cocoon thing, and he's confronted by this spider deity where he has to choose to either embrace his spider side or reject it and stay dead. So once he embraces the spider, he's able to come back to life, and he also gets new powers. He can use his also I should point out that Spider-Man did develop organic webbing shortly before this issue. Basically, now he can use his powers in a couple of new ways. Now he's not just able to stick to stuff with his hands and feet, but also all other parts of his body, so that makes it easier to keep his mask on. Also, he can he has night vision. Night vision, cool. And he has gotten a little stronger too, and he can apparently see through his webbing now. Like, he can separate all his webs and sort of like see through the vibrations going on through the webbing, like how Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender sees through the earth and stuff like that, like a sonar type deal. The Other was a great story arc. I liked it a lot, basically because Spider-Man got new powers, and it was a little nice to see what Peter Parker would do if he knew he was dying, and how would he spend his last day. And I think it's sweet that he wanted to spend enough time with family instead of just trying to beat bad guys. He wants to actually be there for his family, which is nice. Alright, number 3. Maximum Carnage. Like I said, last fall I was reading a few story arcs featuring Carnage, as per recommendation from my friend in Brooklyn, Chris, Dark Avenger C86. Carnage, basically a Maximum Carnage. Carnage is back. He gathers villains, Shriek and Doubleganger, and they pretty much go on a rampage. Later they're joined by Clarion and Demogoblin, and ultimately Spider-Man has to stop them, and he's shortly joined by Venom, Black Cat, Captain America, Iron Fist, and Deathlock, and Firestar. And so pretty much it's not, eventually though, it's not just good versus evil, it's also pretty much Peter wrestling with the idea that he has to stop Carnage for good this time. He feels like he has no choice but to kill Carnage, and if he does that, he feels like if he kills Carnage, then he'll just be as bad as him. So there's that. This is a very long story, I will say that. I think fans of Carnage are going to enjoy this, Spider-Man fans will enjoy it, but it does have a few flaws in it. For one thing, it relies heavily on guest stars. Okay, that's kind of good because I did like the moment where Captain America showed up in this story, which was very well done, but it does rely a lot on the other guest stars showing up. Although the final fight with Carnage is revealed during the final part, it's just between Spider-Man, Venom, and Carnage, so that's fine. That's fine. That was just down to those three during the final part, which is great. But for most of the series, it does rely on guest stars and other villains and stuff. But it's definitely a good story. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, pretty much has to wrestle with his morals. It's not just a test for Peter Parker physically, but morally as well, because he does have to consider whether or not he can actually put an end to this psychopath for good. All right, next up. Next up is a story arc, which is why I kind of said graphic novel / story arc, because while I do have the complete story arc, I don't have it in trade form. And this is pretty recent. It is Spider Island. That's right. I'm using the cover for part 1 in this because this is the cover that they used for the collected edition. Spider Island. Basically, the Jackal sends a bunch of radioactive spiders or genetically engineered spiders into New York City, and almost all of New York has spider powers, and eventually they turn to giant spiders like in that movie Eight-Legged Freaks. I reviewed each individual part of this story arc, and you can go back and watch those, but they'll all basically say the same thing. Dan Slott's an amazing writer for thinking of this. It's definitely one of the best Spider-Man story arcs I've read in years. And what else do I want to say? And it's very amazing. Spider-Man fans are definitely going to enjoy this, as well as fans of the Jackal. And from what I heard, though, I didn't review any of the tie-ins, though. This also had several one-shots, and it did tie in with the Venom series, the current Venom series going on, which was great. Also, it was the end of Anti-Venom, too. So this definitely changed the game. Okay, not just the end of Anti-Venom, but also the return of Kane, and is that all? Yeah. Basically, a lot of stuff happened in this. I would highly recommend this to anyone who's, hasn't given Dan Slott's run a chance. Go out and get the collected edition of this. For anyone who's been reading Spider-Man for the last 2 years since Slott took over, you definitely know what I'm talking about, because this was definitely one of the best things Dan Slott has ever written, in my opinion. Okay, now for the final story arc, my number 1 pick. Some of you should probably figure out that this is obvious, but for those of you who don't know, it is the death of Gwen Stacy. Yep, that's right. The death of Gwen Stacy. This is my favorite story arc because, well, the history behind it. Basically, Gwen was like Peter Parker's first love, okay? They were young, in love, and their relationship was very strong. I mean, the next obvious step for them was marriage. However, it was too early for Peter Parker to even think about getting married. Everyone at Marvel thought, okay, he's too old to get married, so they could have tried to write Gwen out, but that didn't work, so they were left with only one option, and that was to kill Gwen Stacy. So they had so basically the way it worked was Harry Osborn was going through a lot of drug problems and stuff. He was very sick, very ill, and that Harry's illness and pressure from running his company, Norman Osborn, his sanity snapped again, and he became the Green Goblin, blaming Spider-Man for everything that's gone wrong with his son and everything else in his life. So he decides to get revenge by kidnapping Gwen Stacy and taking her to the George Washington Bridge, or the Brooklyn Bridge. And he takes her over the bridge. Spider-Man figures out where he is. He goes after her. But right when he arrives, Goblin throws Gwen off the ledge, and she's about to fall to her death. Spider-Man reaches out with his web, tries to catch her. He does catches her. However, when he brings her up, he discovers that she's already dead. And basically at that moment, Peter Parker was furious, just blind fury. I don't even think he was this mad ever since Uncle Ben died. And he was pretty much getting ready to go, okay, Green Goblin, you're about to die now. And the next issue, it did almost come to that. A final showdown between Peter Parker and the Green Goblin in this warehouse where the Goblin had some stuff stored. And basically, Peter Parker and Spider-Man and Green Goblin, were fighting it out. And right when Spider-Man did have the chance to almost end the Goblin, he still didn't do it. He couldn't do it. Even after the Goblin killed the love of his life, he still could never take a life. And so, at that moment, he was getting ready to walk away. The Goblin thought he could, and right when Spider-Man immediately gave up, the Goblin thought he could get the upper hand real quickly, sent his glider to get Spider-Man, but unfortunately for the Goblin, the Spider-Sense warned Spidey, jumped out of the way of the glider, and it flown through right into the Green Goblin's chest and impaled him against the wall, thus killing Norman Osborn. And so, in a way, the Green Goblin did die. It just wasn't Spider-Man's decision. It was, in a way, the Goblin's. And I remind you again that the way they set up Gwen's death and also the way Norman died were used in Spider-Man the movie with Mary Jane. Yep. And this is a really, really brilliant story. It's a two-parter, 121 and 122. Yep. Basically, when they did the first part, they didn't reveal the title of the book on the first page. No, they saved that till the very end, and right after when they're using this shot, when Spider-Man's holding Gwen's lifeless body, he swears vengeance on the Goblin. There's a little caption near the bottom right corner that says, "Now we can finally reveal to you the title of this issue, The Night Gwen Stacy Died." And it was a very emotional story arc too. It's also in the epilogue after Peter goes home and sees Mary Jane. He pretty much brushes her off because at the time Mary Jane was, the fun-loving party girl, and at that moment Peter is like, okay, you know what, you probably don't want to be here, so just leave. But Mary Jane stays, and that helped plant the seeds of their future relationship. Until they made a deal with the devil. Okay, back to the Gwen Stacy thing. Not just the way, and I think also the death of Gwen Stacy is important is because it kind of marked the end of the Silver Age of comics. It did, and I think it's almost appropriate because Spider-Man was one of the first new heroes of the Silver Age, so it kind of makes sense that they sort of started the ending of the Silver Age right here, because I think right at the moment Gwen died, it pretty much meant, okay, the age of, innocence and superheroes is gone now, and it slowly started to begin that phase where it moved from the Silver Age to the Bronze Age. There are a number of collected editions. There's this one, which I believe was printed back in the 90s. This was reprinted in... No way, it says 2001 in it. I found this on eBay I think 6 years ago. 6 years ago, found it on eBay. I was very happy I found a paperback with reprinted issues of it because... Oh, also, though, this edition does print the 3 issues where Harry gets hooked on drugs and sort of just as kind of a prologue to how it what's going on in 121. But there are other editions of this. There's also Spider-Man: Death of the Stacys, which was a hardcover Ultimate Collection type Marvel Premiere hardcover. That was the series. Death of the Stacys, which collected not only Gwen's death but her father, Captain George Stacy's death as well. And I think recently they released the paperback version of that version. So, there's a paper. I have it on my Amazon wish list. It collects the death of Captain George Stacy and the death of Gwen, and it's only about $14 on Amazon. So, if you want to get that, I would highly recommend it. But this is the number one, my favorite Spider-Man story arc because it did change Peter Parker's life forever. And yeah, that's it. Those are my top 5 Spider-Man story arcs. Just as a quick recap: number 5, Origin of the Hobgoblin. Number 4, Spider-Man the Other. Number 3, Maximum Carnage. Number 2, Spider Island. And number 1, The Death of Gwen Stacy. Okay, and that's all I have to say for my top 5 video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment below whether or not you agree or disagree with any of my opinions. Thank you for watching. Spider-Man 1991 saying see you later and have a nice day.